Nearer, my God, to thee, nearer to thee, e'en though it be a cross that raiseth.
Hello and welcome back. My name is Jesse Nelson. I'm here with the North City Church of Christ, and so today I want to do something that kind of came up from my John sermon in John chapter 4. We have been studying the woman at the well, or the Samaritan woman at the well, and one of the things that we talked about is the Samaritans and their mountain versus the Jewish mountain. And so what I decided to do for today, sorry if I look down, I just like to see what my whole production looks like on the screen. But what I decided to do for today was I wanted to kind of give you a history of Israel and Judah. And so, from John chapter 4. And so what we're going to do is what a lot of people don't know, especially if you're a newer Christian, or maybe, there's some of these things you haven't heard before. You've heard them referenced in sermons, you've heard them referenced maybe in things you've read or listened to or watched, but maybe you don't fully grasp the difference between Israel and Judah. I thought Israel was Judah, and I thought Judah was a tribe of Israel. Well, so that's what we're going to kind of discuss this morning, and we're going to kind of get into where the Samaritans come from, some Old Testament history stuff. I'm going to have a timeline and some charts and some maps up here. And so I thought this will help certain people, and I'm not getting away from the John 4 stuff, but I thought this could be important and would be helpful, and so I've been working on this for a little while. I want to first explain that Israel and Judah used to be one. Israel end up being the 10 northern tribes, and Judah will be called the 2 northern tribes, okay? Or the 2 southern tribes. Judah and Benjamin are called Judah. They became the nation of Judah. And the 10 northern tribes are called Israel. So let's look at some of this stuff. In Genesis 49, you will see, let me get out of the way here. In Genesis chapter 49, you'll see how Jacob divides the 12 tribes according to their future. And you'll see how he blesses or curses, if you want to call it that, each child, and not how the lands will be divided, but this basically gives their future to them. And you get some history there. So it's good to go read Genesis 49. One of these days we'll go through and walk through all of those names. But what I want to do is show you real quick is the division of the land promises. And you see here's all 12 tribes. They used to be one nation, all right? And they used to be called the nation of Israel. And this is where David, right, first became king over, Saul was king over, Solomon was king over. And they didn't have always all this territory. It was something they had to slowly gain. There are times in their history where sometimes they lost it, sometimes they gained it. The Philistines are right there, the Moabites, the Edomites, the Arameans, and up north are the Assyrians, and over, to the western side of Babylon. And then southeast is Egypt. So there's enemies surrounding all of them. But this is the promised land. This is the land that they were promised. And you can see there's Simeon, there's Judah, Dan, Ephraim, Gad, Benjamin, Reuben, Manasseh. You see there has a double portion there. Issachar, Zebulun, Asher, and Naphtali. And those are the 12 sons of Jacob. And they each get a portion of land. And remember, the Levites live in, they didn't get their own land. They live in a portion of all the lands because they're the priests, they're the ones who work in the tabernacles and work in at the altars and all those kind of places. Okay, so, but at one time, this is the promised land, the 12 tribes of Israel. But I'm gonna have to come back. Where'd it go? Let's see here. Did it get deleted? There it is. I don't know what happened. Okay. So there's the 12 kingdoms of Israel and Judah. And this is what it comes to. It ends up being a split between Israel and Judah. And if you look north in the green area where it says Israel, and there's the political capital of Israel, it is Samaria. So this is where you get the term Samaritans from, okay? They're no longer Israelites or Hebrews. They are now Samaritans because they have made their capital, their political capital, Samaria, when Jerusalem was supposed to be the capital, that is the city of David, where the temple was. And in Bethel, you see here, Jeroboam built a sanctuary to God, and people would go and worship there. Okay, so but let's get into some of these charts here for a moment. Let me go away. Okay, so this is an Old Testament survey chart or timeline. Most of this is pretty accurate. Okay, there are so many different versions of this out there. I wouldn't necessarily dispute this in any major, besides maybe some of where the prophets are, but we're not going to get into some of that this morning. So what I want to show you first and foremost is I've highlighted here the circle right there between that split and the V is where Israel and Judah split. That is about 950-ish BC, where they split. This is after Solomon, and this is Jeroboam and Rehoboam. And you can read about that actually in 1 Kings. I don't have it up here, and I should have probably up here. In 1 Kings chapter 12, I'm going to read just kind of what happened here. Okay, this is after Solomon. This is after, Solomon is the son of David, right? And Solomon becomes king, and he's going to die, and he's going to leave his throne to Rehoboam. Well, here's what happens in 1 Kings 12:20. It says, "It came about when all Israel heard that Jeroboam had returned, that they sent and called him to the assembly and made him king over all Israel. None but the tribe of Judah followed the house of David." Okay? And now Rehoboam had come to Jerusalem. He assembled all the house of Judah and the tribe of Benjamin. So that's kind of where you get this Judah and Benjamin are the southern tribes. They become Judah. And north, they become Israel. And so this is what you see here going on in 1 Kings 12. You can read over 1 Kings 11, 1 Kings 12 to kind of get some of this history, okay? And so here's what you're seeing. You're seeing right above where I circle, and I have a little dot over to the left if you follow and you go all the way up. And where Abraham receives this promise is anywhere from 1600 BC to 1800 BC, or 1800 BC to 1600, but it's about 1800 BC, okay? And so this is 900 years after the time of Abraham. So I want you to think for a moment. Remember, between Genesis and Exodus are about 400 years, okay? And then you have the story of Exodus, which Moses' lifespan is 120 years, okay? So basically almost all of Exodus through Deuteronomy is happening within a 120-year period, okay? And because Moses is in 40 years, he's in Egypt, right, where he trains under Pharaoh, or he's under Pharaoh, and he's the adoptive son of Pharaoh's daughter. And then he spends 40 years in Midian, where he meets Jethro, and he gets his wife and kids. And then he comes back, and he brings his people through, and they travel for 40 years through the Promised Land. And remember, Moses dies before they enter into the Promised Land. So his life is broken down into 3 40-year blocks, which gives you about 120 years, okay? And then the book of Judges, where they... Joshua and Judges, right, where Joshua spends time conquering the lands, and between Joshua is another 500 years within one book, okay? Joshua and Judges, 2 books, and Ruth is thrown in there before you get to the time of Samuel and King Saul and King David, and then Saul and David. I think Saul's about 80 years, David's 40 to 60 years when he's king, and then Solomon reigns. So, I mean, you've had a lot of stuff happening up until this point, right? Up until this time, you've had Abraham, you've had Isaac, you've had Jacob, you've had Moses, you've had Joshua, the period of the Judges. Ruth is during the period of the Judges. Then you had Samuel come along, who's the first prophet, who prophesies about Saul becoming king, anoints Saul as king, then goes anoints David as king. Then you have Samuel, it's about 40 to 60 years of David running and being chased out from Saul, and before he becomes king. And then you have all of David's life, Solomon's life. And so all the historical books, Genesis, all the way up until First Kings, is what you see at the very top. It says Genesis and Job, depending on what you think Job is, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon are all written during this time period, okay? And it gives you all the judges there. And then the split of the kingdoms right here in about 950 BC, where the kingdom is divided, you see you have 10 northern tribes, and then you have the southern tribes as well. And what we're going to see, this is not going next. I don't know why not. Okay, here. Those are all the yellow is the 10 northern kings, right? And down at the very bottom, red displays people who were bad kings, and green indicates good kings. You see the 10 northern tribes had zero good kings. They were all bad, right? From Jeroboam all the way on. And they last all the way until about 722 BC, when Assyria comes and makes them captive. And when Assyria conquers them, okay, when Assyria conquers the 10 northern tribes, they never officially come back. Judah doesn't get that land back, okay? And they're just kind of fizzled. And what Assyria did was they split them up, and they brought other nations in, and they intermarried them. And that's where you get this idea of the Samaritans being half-bloods, because of what Assyria did. Not because of all the way back to what Jeroboam did, just, making the capital Samaria. But in 722 BC, Assyria, what they do is they intermarry, and what they try to do is they try to get rid of any political allegiance in the next generations, right? Because now your sons and your daughters are going to be half Assyrian and half Jewish. Who's their allegiance to, right? And so you really get rid of camaraderie. You really get rid of the rebellion when you intermarry and intermix. And they would bring other nations that they've conquered as well into this. So it's not just Assyrian and Judah. So their bloodline is being diminished. And when the Jews would look at the Samaritans, the 10 northern tribes, anybody of the tribe of Israel, they would think they're no longer pure, right? They no longer belong a part of the promise. But as you see with the 10 southern tribes, there's only, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 good kings. And even those good kings have some things that, are against them. But if you look over, I think I have it in the next slide. Here is, I don't know why I just messed a bunch of yellow ink on the thing. But here, I'm going to go back to this last slide here. In 606, if you can look over, that is the beginning of the captivity of Jerusalem. That is when Daniel and his friends are taken, okay? That's when Daniel and his friends are taken. And so from this period, and you can look at this chart. This chart is pretty helpful, okay? It gives you when all the prophets were, when the prophets are prophesying. And that's the book of 1 Kings, 2 Kings, 1 Chronicles, 2nd and 2nd Chronicles, and all the major and minor prophets are basically written during the time of the split of Israel and the split of Judah, all the way up until the destruction, all the way until the book of Daniel. And the return is the 70 year is Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi, okay? So everything's kind of in that block, period. And there's 3 stages to the Jerusalem captivity. It goes from 606 to 597, and then finally the final one is 586. I couldn't see that little number there. And then there's the 70-year captivity. There's the return. But then there's the complete rebellion, and then you have the 440 years or 400 years of silence is what we call, from Old Testament to New Testament, until Jesus comes in about 4 to 6 BC, actually. The more scholars date that, and the better our dating has become and more information has come up, the number 0 is actually not the year Jesus was born. He was probably born in 4 to 6 BC. And so when they first, changed the calendar like that, they were off about 4 or 6 years. So even AD 33, Jesus probably died in AD 28, 29 rather than AD 33. But that's, once again, that's besides the point. That's not a huge deal. But I just kind of wanted to show you guys this this chart. I wanted to kind of give you a little bit of history. You can use this chart here. I'm going to get my. You can if you want this chart, let me know. This is extremely helpful for when you're reading the Old Testament to be able to put everything in chronological order. I have a class that I teach that explains this. We get the whiteboard out. We go through and describe all these kind of things. But so this is where the Samaritans come from. So this is where we get this idea, okay, of the Samaritans. All right, there's 2 of me. And so when Jesus comes on the scene, what he's doing is he is offering salvation to these people who the Jews would look at and say, they're not worthy, they're no longer children of Abraham. Their bloodline has been so diminished and so distorted that they don't deserve salvation. So much so that when Jesus goes through Samaria, it's a surprise, because normally they would go around the eastern border of Samaria and go the long way to avoid going through Samaria. And Jesus goes through Samaria and he meets this Samaritan woman. So these are the Samaritans, and this is kind of the history. I know this is quick. I know this didn't cover everything, but for those who don't know a lot of this history and a lot of this dating stuff, I wanted to give you an opportunity to see some of these things. This wasn't a full discourse, but one of these days we're going to do an Old Testament survey class, and we'll really go through some of these things. But I wanted people to understand what this demographic is going into the time of Jesus. So anyway, I hope this helps. I hope this was at least somewhat informative. You may have to watch this a few times. I might have this chart somewhere. I'm going to probably download it and maybe have it in the comments somewhere if I can under the video. But anyway, I love you guys. Hope you guys have a great day. Hope this study helps, and I hope it was somewhat informative. But till then, God bless.